Make sure to check out all of our authors on social media. You can find links to their profiles in the description box. Make sure to follow so you don't miss any bookish updates. My name is Amy Prokopis. Welcome to Wednesdays with Writers. I'm the author of the young adult novel, The Arena, and my new urban fantasy young adult book will be out in the fall. And today, for this week, my guest is Kat Winters.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I love doing stuff like this. It's always so much fun.
Oh, I've loved doing this so far. It's this pretty new series for me, but it's been so much fun learning, and I've grown a lot just from the few interviews that I've done. So, and I know we're both like newer authors. I have one book out, and I think you only have the one too, right?
Yeah, mine came out actually just a few days ago was the 1 year anniversary.
Oh
So
my gosh. Well, congrats.
it's always funny because in my family, we like to joke that my book and I share a birthday because it just happened to release on my birthday.
Did it really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday also.
Thank
That's
you.
really cool. So what was your journey like towards publication? Have you always written books and stuff? I think we all have like a similar origin story, but it's still fun to hear like what the differences are. So what about you? How did you come to find yourself writing books?
My writing journey kind of started accidentally. I grew up in a really, really bad environment. I had divorced parents, and unfortunately, my father didn't get a lot of custody, even though he should have.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really hard because he was the supportive one. My brother and I, we were stuck with our mother, who was neglectful. She was mentally and emotionally abusive. It was a really, really hard time for us. And I just loved to read. It was how I escaped and got out of my head. Later, we'd learned that the reason I was always stuck in my head was partially because of my ADHD, which
Same girl.
makes so much sense now.
Yes.
But like, I was always reading something just so that I could zone out and not be home.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember being in school. They always had you writing something.
Oh, yeah. There was always some kind of project going.
Yeah. And I was, for whatever reason, I don't know if this was normal, but growing up, I had a lot of creative writing assignments. Like, I don't know if my schools were just special, but like every other day we were getting a new writing assignment.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's so cool.
and I was the only one really trying.
Like really getting into it.
Really getting
More
into it.
than
And I never really put two and two together about how it was helping me the same way that reading was until I was in 5th grade. I wrote this really, really stupid story. Ironically, I'm actually rewriting it right now.
Oh, that's really
and turning it into a book.
Oh my gosh.
So it was about a pirate with a heart of gold and this really headstrong yet disgustingly loyal princess. And he kidnaps her, and there's like this whole, it's a lot of political espionage and amnesia and love. And
Oh my gosh.
and I wrote it back in 5th grade. Back then it was not very good. And it was horrendous. Don't get me started. I'm sure I could find it if I wanted to.
Oh, I have a couple like that too. Oh yeah.
And my teacher, she wanted to talk to me that day. You know, we were chill. She didn't terribly like me. I didn't terribly like her, mostly because I wouldn't shut up in class. As you can probably tell, I talk a lot. And she looks at me. I thought I was in trouble when she called me up, because that's usually what happens.
Right?
Can't tell you how many times she called my parents. But she calls me up, and I'm standing there shaking like the little leaf I was. And she's like, you know, this is actually very good. And I'm like, did she just pay me a compliment? Because that was a big deal. And she's going on and telling me, like, I've spent years doing this and reading all these stories. And for fifth graders, you can't expect a lot. But compared to everyone else's, this is very thought out, a lot of attention to detail. And so apparently my ADHD liked the serotonin. And so my little brain sat there like, let's roll with this.
Right? Let's do another one.
So, no, actually what I did was I took it home and I sat at my computer for a week straight and I turned this 2-page story into a 15-page script for a play.
Oh my gosh.
And I brought it to my principal and I'm like, can we make this happen?
Oh,
and he said, and he sits there, he reads it and he's like, we don't have the funding for a production like this, but this is very good. And I really hope that you keep at this.
Oh my gosh. That's adorable.
So there's little me in 5th grade, about the same height that I am now, because I have not grown an inch. And I'm sitting there looking up at this like 6.5-foot man with the dumbest smile on my face. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be a writer.
Oh man.
And
I love the origin story.
Right? And I thought I was going to be writing screenplays. Turns out I suck at that.
Oh, it is a whole different
it's a whole skill set that I don't have.
Yes. I've never really tried. I used to write plays like that too when I was about 5th grade because that was the only
like a phase.
I think so. It's really like the only structure we know before we have all the grammar and stuff to really put together like a book. Mm-hmm. So I did the same thing. I wrote plays like that and I made all my neighborhood friends come and we reenact the plays and I would get really serious about it. Like, guys, we need to memorize our lines.
And they're just sitting there having a blast. Like, we're just chilling.
We're just playing. It's Saturday, whatever.
And we're here like, no, do not insult my baby. You're going to get this right. And so I spent like that whole summer just trying to write a screenplay, utterly failing.
Oh my gosh.
And then I get to 6th grade and I meet the world's greatest teacher.
Oh, teachers can make such a big difference.
I actually want to be a teacher and a writer and a foster parent.
I was a teacher and a writer.
and she's just such a huge inspiration for that for me. Like,
I love to hear that.
She was like the sweetest.
Like an English teacher for you?
Yeah. So my school, we had humanities, which was like grammar, English, a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't know why they didn't just call it English.
Yeah.
Because once we reached high school, that's just what they called it. So I don't know why they made a big deal about it. But she was absolutely my savior because middle school was when things really started to get bad in my house. The abuse got worse. I started to develop an eating disorder because of the abuse. Ooh. I was working a job to feed myself. I was 13 years old with a job buying my own groceries.
Wow.
And
really difficult.
And being 13, legally, I wasn't supposed to have a job. So I was being paid under the table and I wasn't making much. So there were a lot of, and I only saw my dad a couple times a month. So I wasn't eating a lot. And part of that was from the disorder. And some of that was just because I couldn't afford it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This teacher would see what was going on. And she was just an absolute godsend for me, which is a lot to say because I don't like God for obvious reasons. But she made a book club during lunch and would provide snacks so that I didn't have to sit alone and so that I would eat.
Oh my gosh.
She knew I didn't feel safe at home, so I didn't sleep a lot. Mm-hmm. So as long as I finished my work, she let me sleep in class.
Oh, that's amazing.
She made sure that I could attend field trips. She made sure that I got my homework done. Mm-hmm. And she saw how much of a release it was for me to write for our creative writing assignments. And every single time she would read my story aloud. And she would sit there and she'd tell the class, this is what writing is.
Oh my God.
Where you lose yourself in the work. This is what writing is. And every time we had an assignment, she'd call me up and she'd tell me that she expected great things from me.
Oh my gosh.
And little does she know, because unfortunately, she left the district around the same time that I moved out of state and I lost contact with her.
Oh.
Someday I hope to find her and just tell her how much of an impact she had.
Oh my gosh.
But what she doesn't know was that the first book I ever fully wrote was actually inspired by one of those stupid assignments. I'm never going to publish it. It's an absolute trash fire, but it's a huge deal for me that it all started with that. She's the reason that I'm here today.
That is so inspiring. I hope you get to tell her that sometime.
So do I. Someday I really hope to stand in front of her and show her what I accomplished and tell her that this was because of her, because she gave me a chance.
Oh my God.
And I mean, it's because of her that I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to be a teacher and that I'm going to keep writing and that I'm going to be a foster parent, because she treated me like her own kid and she absolutely had no obligation to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That makes like the teacher in me feel so good, because it really is like such a difficult job and really a thankless one too. But when you hear stories like that, like teachers really do make a huge impact. They're in a lot of ways a part of the families that
Absolutely.
they're serving, because it's more than just kids they teach and they help. They're helping the community members, and it all ends up going back into like families and communities. So that's such a big deal. Wow. I love that story. That's so heartwarming.
It's probably like my favorite story in the world to tell, because she meant the absolute world to me. And I was so sad. Like a week before we moved out, I was trying to reconnect with a bunch of teachers because I didn't want to lose contact. Yeah. And I found out that she had left the district about a week before that.
No.
And it was really, really hard for me because a lot changed between the time that I left her class and the time that I moved.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted her to see that. And it reached a point where I valued her validation more than most of my friends and family, because she was the one who put in the effort and she deserved to see the results.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I hope that you can reconnect with her and you can like give her a copy of your book or something. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine how cool that would be? That's like the full circle moment there.
I have limited editions that I haven't released yet because it's expensive.
Yeah.
With an exclusive cover and exclusive sprayed edges, and they all come signed.
Oh my gosh.
And they're so expensive to make that I'm probably not going to give a lot away for free, but there's always going to be one set aside for her. Every book I write, she gets a copy no matter what she says. She just
Oh man.
If it weren't for her, these books wouldn't exist. So
just start a campaign to reconnect you guys.
Honestly, I would love it to be one of those TikTok do your thing people, reconnect them.
That's what we should do. We should do that.
Unfortunately, there's a hard middle ground with that, because I don't have a lot of pictures of her and I can't show pictures of me on social media because, like I said, abusive mother. I basically ran away from her house.
Yeah.
When I was a junior. And so that's part of why I write under a pen name and I don't share my face on social media, because I don't want her to find me.
I don't blame you.
I spent 16 years in that house in utter hell. I'm not going back to that.
Oh no, I can totally understand that. Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about your book a little bit, because I haven't read it yet, but it seems really interesting. So give me like a synopsis. What's your pitch?
I've never been good at that.
It's the hardest thing in the world to take a whole book
and sum it down to like 6 sentences.
It's so hard.
Especially because like we know how it ends, and it's really hard not to spoil that.
Yes, to still keep it interesting. Writing book blurbs is the hardest part of the whole process.
I hate it so much.
Oh my gosh.
I hate it.
So much time, and I'm never satisfied with it. I never am.
And it's super ironic because I like to joke. I'm great with words, just not speaking them.
Oh yeah, that's
I
totally
have this
different. Yeah.
I have this long email that I wrote up that I use to send to all these bookstores to try and get them to stock my book. And everyone's like, this is a really well written email. And I'm like, thanks. I can't English.
Yep. If I had to pitch to somebody on the phone like that, like reaching out to bookstores and stuff, I've gotten better at it this last year since I've had to do a little bit more of it, but
it's a confidence thing for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely not as nicely put together as that list like you're talking about, like that email would be.
Well, I offer that as a service. I offer to write those emails for people who have a hard time putting it together themselves. So, because I've learned I'm good at that.
There's definitely a market for that.
Definitely.
So you're a young adult, don't you?
I write a little bit of everything, but yeah, I usually stay in young adult or new adult. At some point, I'd like to try and write a spicy romance just because guilty pleasure. They're such a guilty pleasure. I love them.
Oh, and there's like
big market for them.
Yes. They're hot right now on TikTok. They go like hotcakes. So
I'm writing one where it's like two spies from rivaling agencies accidentally cross, and it's like a spicy romance. And I wrote in the blurb, watch this be the most best-selling book I ever write. Because everyone loves that stuff.
Yeah, the one that you take a chance on. You never know. That's just the way like TikTok in general works. You don't know exactly what's going to take off until it does. And everything changes so fast.
So fast.
You hop on that trend, it might already
and it's gone.
Out. Yeah, it might already be onto something new. It's crazy. But the community of like the book community and the writing community on TikTok,
especially the indie community, is so wonderful.
Everyone is so supportive. It's the internet. You expect to get like a certain amount of like weird comments or maybe even some mean ones. And I have had none of that on TikTok. I've been very lucky. I'll probably now immediately get something. So
you're going to get trolls now.
But yes. But the community is so supportive. And I think that's something in the industry of like book publishing that's just really unique to the
indie community. Yeah.
Because we're not competing with each other. It's not like
we're building with each other.
Yeah. It's not like my book being successful keeps your book from being successful, because it's totally different things. The people that are, if they're reading those same books, they're probably both going to build on each other and compare books to one another and it helps each other out because we're linking and networking, and there's really no competition in the world of like publishing books. And I love that.
I love our community so much. And I love it to such a point that as soon as I knew self-publishing was a thing, I just rabbit holed. I am a huge supporter of indie authors, indie businesses, indie musicians. My best friend is an indie musician. She's an absolute goddess. I love her.
Oh my God.
And her and I were like, our community is so strong, but there's a huge disconnect. Indie authors don't think about indie musicians. Indie musicians don't think about indie businesses. There's a huge disconnect. So her and I actually have started a project to break that barrier down. Her and I...
Tell us about that project, because you had mentioned that to me.
I'm so excited for it.
Go for it. Tell me all about it. I'd love to hear.
Coming this January, her and I are launching a magazine and a podcast that's all about indie creation. We're going to highlight indie authors and indie musicians and indie businesses, and we're going to build off of each other and share our tips and share our journeys, what works, what doesn't, the highs and the lows, because our community is so strong. We lean on each other a lot, but can you imagine if those walls came down and we just all merged and helped each other build? There's so much potential for exponential growth for all of us.
I think
I'm just so thrilled.
Cool. And we're living in like the world of everything indie, like you're talking about in all industries, did not exist with as much accessibility like even 5 years ago as it does now. It's so...
Her and I her and we were talking about it in our pilot episode when we were recording,
Mm-hmm.
indies get a bad rap. People are always like,
Yeah.
oh, if you had to do it yourself, then you're probably not any good.
Right. Yeah.
But now indies are what's making it big because we know it will work.
Mm-hmm.
We're fighting for it. So it's going to be top tier. We have to fight to get out there, and
you do it all yourself. I mean,
yeah.
that's what the entire indie community is. You're the marketing agent. You're the publicity,
the
writer. Yeah. You hand make the content. That's all on you unless you hire it out. But most of us do a lot of it ourselves
because that's what we can afford.
Yeah, it's a small budget thing, but I mean, anybody with like a computer can start up an indie business online. You can get a website. Anybody that has a computer and a YouTube account can put music out and record like singles and stuff and put it on Spotify. It's gotten so much more accessible to do it and be pretty successful at it too, because you're on the same marketplaces as like
everybody else.
And yeah, you're out there just like anyone else. And that doesn't mean that you're worse or you're not as good because you are coming from a place where you've done it all yourself. It means that maybe you know more of the processes even that goes into all of that. So,
and her and I were talking about it. We're like, indie is becoming so accessible and we're doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
Indie is destroying the traditional styles.
It's definitely morphed into something else.
Nobody really wants to sign with big publishers much these days. Nobody wants to sign with big labels. Nobody wants investors because they tell you what to do and there's still no guarantee it's going to work. But indies, we know that we're going to put our full effort into it and we're going to make it work. So we don't want to listen to somebody telling us what's not going to work because we're going to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a wonderful thing to see us taking back that power that a lot of these industries want to keep a hold on.
Have control of. I think it's really beautiful the way that like it's all creative endeavors is what like the indie community is. I mean, everything from small business to like music and everything artistic, it's all indie. But I think it's beautiful because it's exactly what like the art form itself is. They're also different and unique to the individual creator. And I think it's really neat to see that the marketplace is becoming that way also. From like the business stance, everyone's coming from different, no one's coming from the same place from the business side. I think it's really neat.
I mean, her and I talked about it, it's like everybody's path is going to be so exponentially different. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to make it special. No two people are doing the same thing. And we all have something to give. Mm-hmm. And there should never be a barrier to keep us from giving it.
Oh no, it's so unique. So are you working on anything at the moment, like a new book that might be coming in?
I am working on so many things.
I was going to say, I know that you'd mentioned that you had your spicy book kind of going on. It sounds like you've got quite a few projects. Is there anything in the works that you're planning to publish relatively soon or
my hopes are by January, I'm going to have the magazine, the podcast, and a Patreon where you get a monthly short story, an indie book rec. I'm even going to have a tier for authors to help them with their work and that kind of stuff. But as far as my books go, right now, my first priority is to raise money to make Free Me into an audiobook so that it's more accessible.
I love audiobooks. I'm dying to get mine into audio form.
It's so expensive.
It is expensive. It's not going to happen as soon as I had hoped, but it'll get there eventually.
I definitely learned from my publishing journey that I know what I prioritize. Mm-hmm. And going forward, I'm not going to publish until I can afford to do all the things that I prioritize.
Yeah. There's definitely, that's the struggle with the indie side of publishing versus traditional is you have to put all the money into it before you know what you'll get back out. So it is kind of a gamble and a risk. And I know that that doesn't appeal to a lot of people, and that's why they decide to stick with querying and trying to get the traditional deal, which is also great. But I think it all kind of evens out pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Indie publishing and traditional publishing, it really just depends on maybe your particular book, because like romance in the indie world takes off like crazy.
So fast.
People do so well publishing romance books themselves, self-publishing it. And I think it also depends on your business style, how much control you want to have in the creative process, which was a big selling point to me. I've really enjoyed
Definitely
that side of it more than I thought I would. Even the business side was not something I thought I would like. And that's why I had originally thought I would do traditional. And the more and more I looked into it, the more like interesting the business side was to me. So it really just depends on your avenue. I think both options are equally as valid. And it really is a business more than people think of it as being.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're doing it because we like to tell stories and to write books. The business side comes second, but it is a business.
I mean, everyone's like, oh, it's just so easy to write. And I'm like, dude, no, it's not. I've got to market it. I've got to write it. I've got to edit it. There's so much that goes into it. And like, people are always like, well, why does it take you so long to finish a book? And I'm like, because I'm pouring my heart and soul out, man.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of it, ADHD.
Yeah, finding the time and committing to it too.
Because I've got over 10 works in progress, plus the short stories for the Patreon that I'm working on right now.
Oh yeah.
Plus the magazine and the podcast, and I'm doing a reading journal for people to like write down their thoughts on books, because people apparently really like how I review my books, and it's really weird. But yeah, I mean, I've got The Spies. I've got a queer Hallmark Christmas-esque type story. I've got...
Ooh, that's cute.
I know, right? I'm so excited for it. It's going to be so adorable. I've got a high school romance. I've got my pirates. I'm so excited for my pirates.
Pirates were huge a couple years ago. I remember when that went through the book.
I remember, I still remember the first book I tried to write. I was in my Twilight phase.
Of course, yes.
So I had this one character who was like this half vampire girl. And I've always wanted to be a mom. So for whatever reason, I like projected that onto her. And so I made her get pregnant with twins, and they're like a Scooby-Doo gang-esque thing. It was a mess. It was such a mess.
Gotta love Scooby-Doo. I do remember.
Was such a gem.
Oh my gosh, there were so many vampire books out during that time. So many. And I think it's kind of had a resurgence recently.
Definitely.
Twilight, now that it went on to Netflix, I'm seeing a lot of that popping up on TikTok too. So I wouldn't be surprised if vampires and paranormal stuff comes back pretty strong in the next year or two.
I really hope that paranormal comes back.
That's in my wheelhouse. I love fantasy. My upcoming project is urban fantasy, and it involves all those kinds of like demons, vampires, all of that lore is in it. And I have some projects that go along with it that are strictly like just like the vampires and stuff. So I hope it comes back for
I want it to come back so bad. Like my friend, I actually named a character after her in a different book, but she wants me to give her a copy of that first book I tried to write. And I'm like, no, that thing is painful. Instead, I'm going to write you this. And I'm writing a love triangle between a girl and her brother's two best friends after he died. One of them's a vampire, one of them's a human. I'm so excited for it.
I love paranormal stuff.
Because it's so unrealistic. It's so pleasurable.
It's escapism at its finest.
Absolutely.
It really is. Kind of like how your origin story, I guess.
My origin story.
I think a lot of people read to escape their lives. And so
especially right now.
Yeah, especially right now. Reading, people were reading more during the pandemic when we were all home. And so I think people definitely read to escape their real lives. And I know that I write to do the same. So I like to write things that I'm not going to experience in real life.
Definitely.
I mean, of course there are like real themes in it because it keeps you connected and grounded, like romance. Romance is something that everybody is familiar with, whether they're in a relationship or not. We all know what we like and expect in those kinds of relationships. So even even if the setting is not
realistic,
it's connected enough to be, enticing and familiar, but yet still a total escape from real life. And there's something to be said about that.
Absolutely. Everything I write has some little bit of romance in it. And everything that I write has something from my real life in it. I mean, if you read Free Me, everything in it, either I experienced or my best friend did. Mm-hmm. And it's how I cope. Oh, yeah. All of my books have something semi-heavy in it. And it's just how I've always coped.
Well, we are winding down on our time. We're starting to get kind of close. It's counting down on us. So tell us, where are your books? So where's Free Me available? Is it wide on Amazon?
Free Me is available just about everywhere. The only place it's not available, I only recently learned about Kobo or whatever it's called.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I got to look into that. But it's on Barnes & Noble. It's on Books A Million, Amazon. I sell signed copies on my website, and I have merch made for it.
Oh, my gosh. I'll definitely link you in the podcast. So I'm going to include Kat Winters. I've got her TikTok. I have Instagram. And I also am going to include a link to that website where everyone can get signed copies and find your merch. I've definitely seen your spread of merch. It is pretty amazing.
I've got a whole bunch of other stuff that I haven't even released yet. I have tea. I have tea, for God's sake.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to have to be on the lookout for some tea. I like it.
Absolutely. I love the tea. It was made by a friend of mine who has a tea business. She has synesthesia. So the tea tastes like how the book tastes to her. When she reads it, she tastes it.
Oh my gosh. I'll definitely have to link that in the description box. That'll also be in a card at the beginning of the episode. And I think that's about it. So I'm so glad that you can join me.
I'm so glad I got to join. This was so fun.
And I'm going to have to make sure and keep up with your TikTok. So when you launch your magazine and your podcast, all for indie creators, that way I can include all of that and push that out for you also. I'm so excited.
And we would love to have you if you are ever interested. We're always looking for more people.
Okay, well, put me on the list because I would love to be involved in that.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. And I love how the indie community has responded to it. I love that we're all like, yes, let's work together.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it just makes us all better at what we do. And any way that we can support each other. I know I always appreciate it when someone gives me a shout out. So I always give other people a shout out that we're working towards the same things. And
I live for shout outs. Like my newsletter, I give shout outs. My Patreon, I give shout outs. It's like we're nothing without each other.
That is definitely true. I totally agree with that. Well, thank you for joining me.